Here are the top stories for today, May 14, 2020. The Interagency Task Force places areas with low risk of COVID-19 infection under a modified general community quarantine. NCRPO Chief Debold Sinas will face criminal charges for violating protocols under the enhanced community quarantine during his birthday party. The Department of Trade and Industry says up to 78% of employees may return to work under the modified enhanced community quarantine. And the government adds informal settlers and persons with disabilities as priorities in the Balik Probinsya program. Good day, I'm Rom Dulfo. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. Our top story, the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases on Wednesday amended a guideline lifting the community quarantine in areas with low risk of COVID-19 infection. Interior Secretary Eduardo Año said the IATF decided to amend the guideline after local officials explained in petitions that they are not ready to end the community quarantine in the respective provinces and cities. 8 areas with low risk of infection will now be under modified general community quarantine starting May 16. These are Ilocos, Mimaropa, Bicol, Western Visayas, Eastern Visayas, Northern Mindanao, Soxargen, and Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. Meantime, areas with moderate risk of infection will be under GCQ from May 16 to 31. These are Cagayan Valley, Central Luzon, Calabarzon, Cordillera Administrative Region, Central Visayas except Cebu City, Zamboanga Peninsula, Davao Region, and Caraga. Areas with high risk of infection will be placed under a modified ECQ from May 60 to 31. These are Metro Manila, Laguna, and Cebu City. By May 16, all ECQ areas are expected to transition to either a modified ECQ, GCQ, or MGCQ. Amid the fight against COVID-19 pandemic, Malacanang has released fresh guidelines for the implementation of quarantine protocols nationwide. Benj Bondok tells us more about these new guidelines.
Malacanang on Wednesday released fresh guidelines for the implementation of quarantine protocols nationwide. Beginning May 16, minimum standards should be observed in places where enhanced community quarantine, modified enhanced community quarantine, and general community quarantine would be implemented. These standards include the use of face masks, frequent sanitation and hand washing, and avoiding touching their face and other surfaces, strict social distancing of at least 1 meter, reconfiguration of workspaces, and the putting of markers in public places. People residing in places where ECQ and modified ECQ will be enforced must 100% stay at home. Vulnerable individuals such as senior citizens and transmitters such as young people are not allowed to go outside of their homes while GCQ is being implemented. Outdoor exercise is not allowed during the ECQ period, while people from areas placed under modified ECQ can walk, jog, run, and bike so long as they observe safety protocols such as wearing of face masks and practicing social distancing of at least 2 meters. He said limited sports such as golf and tennis are allowed in places under GCQ. Mass gatherings are still prohibited in areas under ECQ. A maximum of 5 people is allowed in areas where modified ECQ will be implemented, and a maximum of 10 people could hold a meeting in areas placed under GCQ. For transportation, the government would allow the use of shuttles for frontline workers and private vehicles for persons allowed to leave homes in areas under ECQ. For areas under modified ECQ, the government would permit the use of company shuttles, personal vehicles, bicycles, motorcycles, electric scooters, and public shuttles. All public and private transportation are allowed in areas under GCQ, but strict safe distancing and safety protocols must be followed. Domestic flights are prohibited and international flights are limited in areas under ECQ and modified ECQ. Meanwhile, workers in the private sector must undergo COVID-19 tests and must be provided shuttle services. Skeleton workforce in government would be allowed during the imposition of ECQ and modified ECQ. Alternative work arrangements for government employees would be practiced in areas under GCQ. School premises are still closed in areas under ECQ and GCQ. Skeleton workforce, meanwhile, may be adopted in areas under GCQ to process students' requirements and make preparations for graduation activities and class opening. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Bench Bondo.
The guidelines on the distribution of the second tranche of emergency subsidies under the Social Amelioration Program or SAP will be released this week. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque gave the assurance after Social Welfare Secretary Rolando Bautista said a written order from Malacanang is needed before the second phase of SAP can be implemented. Bautista said local government units also need to submit their liquidation reports prior to the distribution of the second tranche of cash aid to poor families to make sure that the right beneficiaries receive the payout. The implementation of the first wave of the SAP initially covered 18 million poor families. Roque announced Tuesday that an additional 5 million beneficiaries not included in the lists would also get the first tranche of the emergency subsidies. Due to limited funds approved by Congress, only poor families living in areas under ECQ will be qualified in the next wave of the emergency subsidies. Budget airlines cancel all their domestic and international flights until the end of May, and tricycle operations in modified ECQ areas will depend on their LGUs. More on this from Marita Muahe.
The Department of Transportation said the operation of tricycles in areas under the Modified Enhanced Community Quarantine may be allowed by the local government and the Department of the Interior and Local Government. DOTR Assistant Secretary Gades Hope Libiran said tricycles are under the jurisdiction of LGU and the ILG. Under the new set of guidelines issued by the IATF-EID, rail transport, buses, jeepneys, taxis, and transport network vehicle services remain banned in MECQ areas. Similar to the ECQ, however, there may be exceptions allowed for tricycles, subject to guidelines from the DILG and the local government. Meanwhile, budget carriers Cebu Pacific and AirAsia Philippines canceled all their international and domestic flights from May 16 to 31. The announcement comes after Malacanang declared that Metro Manila, Laguna, and Cebu would be under a modified enhanced community quarantine until the end of the month. Cebu Pacific said affected passengers may rebook their flights within 3 months, with rebooking fee and fare difference waived. They may also opt for a full refund or place their ticket value in a travel fund that they could use within 1 year. Bookings with AirAsia Philippines with departure dates between March 23 to July 31 may choose a new travel date before October 31 without additional cost but subject to seat availability. They may also retain the ticket value in their membership account. In other news, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines on Wednesday urged clergy members to mark May 14 as a day of prayer and fasting amid the COVID-19 crisis. The initial proposal for the Day of Prayer came from the High Committee for the Human Fraternity, which was formed after Pope Francis and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar signed a document on human fraternity in 2019. Earlier this month, the Holy Father invited people to join the inter-religious prayer on May 14 for an end to the COVID-19 pandemic. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Marita Muahe.
Still to come. The Department of Trade and Industry says up to 78% of employees may return to work under the Modified Enhanced Community Quarantine. More on these when the PNA Newsroom continues.
Wala ka mang lagnat, walang ubo, maaaring nahawaan ka. At bawal manghawa. Yung sinundan mo sa pila, yung binilhan mo, binigyan mo ng pera, tinabihan mo, kinausap mo, nahawaan mo na. May natanungan ka, best friend mo, nanay mo, hindi ka man tablan, superman ka man, Hindi sila. Bawal manghawa. Ang sumpa ng COVID-19 kay daling ikalat. Sa bawat labas mo sa bahay, maaaring may mawala ng buhay. Wala ka mang ramdam na sakit, maaaring nahawaan ka. Bawal manghawa.
Malacanang has shrugged off a study that showed that the Philippines is among the worst performing countries in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque described the study published on the website endcoronavirus.org as simply one of the many studies that ranked countries' COVID response. The study classified the Philippines as among the red countries that need to take action. Roque said based on another global poll, Filipinos expressed satisfaction with the performance of the administration in handling the COVID-19 crisis. He was referring to the Global Crisis Perceptions Index released by Singapore-based insights firms Black Box Research and Toluna. With an index score of 49, the study showed that the Philippines ranked 8th on the list of 23 nations where citizens assessed the government's COVID-19 containment measures. Roque said the palace was elated by the poll results but acknowledged that the government needs the help of the private sector, the media, and the community to stop the further spread of COVID-19. The Philippine National Police will be filing a criminal case against NCRPO Chief Major General Sinas, along with other senior police officials, over alleged violations of quarantine protocols during his birthday celebration. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said this development was relayed to him by PNP Chief General Archie Gamboa over a phone conversation on Thursday. He said Gamboa also bared that the PNP is also getting clearance from the Office of the President to file administrative charges against Sinas. Roque announced that Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea has ordered PNP Internal Affairs Services or PNP-ES to send him a copy of the results of the PNP probe into the controversial birthday bash. Roque emphasized that nobody, including national or local officials, should be exempted from quarantine protocols. Sinas earlier apologized over the incident but claimed some of the pictures circulating on social media were edited and grabbed from old posts. In business, more employees are expected to go back to their jobs under the modified enhanced community quarantine. Trade Chief Ramon Lopez said around 75 to 78% are allowed to work under MECQ. Metro Manila, Laguna, and Cebu City were listed under MECQ. While still in ECQ measures, these areas are allowed to partially open some sectors. The Department of Trade and Industry and the Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, earlier issued minimum health standards for companies that will resume operations once ECQ is eased. The protocol includes COVID-19 testing to workers, physical distancing, regular disinfection, and providing personal protective equipment, among others. Meanwhile, Albay 2nd District Representative Joey Salceda said the challenge now is the movement of additional workforce in places under MECQ. But Salceda welcomed the decision of the Interagency Task Force on Emerging Infectious Diseases on easing restrictions and allowing some economic activities after a 2-month lockdown. The local government of Bataan is asking to hold mass testing for COVID-19 before the province lifts the quarantine. More on this and other news from the provinces from Chris Mundo.
Local officials in Bataan want mass testing for COVID-19 prior to the lifting of the enhanced community quarantine on May 16. Dinalupihan Mayor Maria Angela Garcia said they recommend province-wide mass testing in an effort to manage, contain, and prevent transmission of COVID-19. The provincial government has entered into a memorandum of agreement with the Jose B. Lingad Memorial Hospital in San Fernando City, Pampanga, and the Philippine Red Cross for the mass testing. The Bataan General Hospital is also rushing its accreditation as a COVID-19 testing facility. Meanwhile, Iloilo welcomes the shift to modified general community quarantine for areas classified as low risk for COVID-19 on May 16. Governor Arthur Defensor Jr. said the 43 local chief executives in the province backed the gradual transition of the province from ECQ to modified GCQ. As a low-risk area, this means they will just follow minimal health protocols like social distancing, wearing face masks, proper hand washing, but all the rest of the activities will resume. The mayors also agreed to still prevent inbound air and sea travel, as it was observed that COVID-19 cases in the province were usually imported. Meanwhile, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao Interagency Task Force welcomed new members to its ranks in the fight against COVID-19. The new members include the Police Regional Office BARMM, the Military's Western Mindanao Command, the Office of the Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process Cotabato City, and Office of the Civil Defense BARMM. With the recent development of the classification of BARMM as a low-risk area, the BIATF said new guidelines would be released within this week under the Modified General Community Quarantine Mode. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Chris Mundo.
Up next, the government adds informal settlers and persons with disabilities as priorities in the Balik Probinsya program. And health experts warn smokers are more vulnerable to the coronavirus. The PNA Newsroom returns after these reminders.
Kakagaling ko lang ng grocery. Siyempre, hindi ko hahayaan na pumasok ang COVID-19 sa bahay at mapahamak ang pamilya ko. Kaya iiwan ko ang sapatos ko sa labas. At ngayon, maghuhugas ako ng kamay ng 20 seconds. O ayan, wala na ang virus. Tandaan, buhay ng pamilya natin na nakasalalay. Let's heal as one.
Alam niyo ba na pumapasok ang COVID-19 sa ating katawan sa pamamagitan ng mata, ilong at bibig? Kaya lagi kaming conscious dito sa bahay kapag umuubo kami. Lagi kami naghuhugas ng kamay in 20 seconds. Pag lumalabas kami, lagi namin suot ang mask. Lagi lang natin tatandaan mga mamshi. Buhay ng pamilya natin ang nakasalalay dito. Let's heal as one.
Tandaan ang tamang paraan ng paghuhugas at paglilinis ng kamay upang makaiwas sa iba't ibang karamdaman. Basain ng tubig ang mga kamay at sabunin. Unang sabunin ang mga palad at ang likod ng mga kamay. Kuskusin na maigi ang pagitan ng mga daliri at maging ang mga kuko. Isunod ang pagitan ng mga hinlalaki at kuskusin ng paikot ang mga dulo ng mga daliri sa magkabilang palad. Banlawang mabuti ang mga kamay sa malinis na tubig at patuyuin ang mga kamay gamit ang single-use towel o air dryer. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
Besides those who want to return to their respective provinces, informal settlers and persons with disabilities or PWDs will also be among those prioritized as beneficiaries of the Balik Probinsya Bagong Pag-asa program. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the priorities will be those who permanently want to return to the provinces and informal settlers who want to return, especially those living in danger zones in Metro Manila. PWDs who want to return to their respective provinces will also be prioritized. The BP2 program seeks to decongest Metro Manila, which is home to 12.87 million Filipinos. Last week, President Duterte signed Executive Order 114, which institutionalized the BP2 program to ensure balanced regional development and equitable distribution of wealth, resources, and opportunities. The BP2 program also aims to boost countryside development and inclusive growth and improve quality of life in rural areas. It is also meant to prepare the country for the new normal after the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic and other future health crises. Trips to tourist hubs such as beaches, resorts, and water parks are still prohibited under 3 types of community quarantines being implemented by the government. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque enumerated the sectors which will be allowed, partially allowed, and not allowed under Enhanced Community Quarantine, Modified ECQ, and General Community Quarantine. The new set of guidelines were released by the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases on Wednesday. Other sectors which will remain banned under the ECQ, MECQ, and GCQ include travel agencies, tour operators, reservation and service and related activities, gyms, fitness studios, and sports facilities. Also banned are cinemas and other entertainment industries, libraries, archives, museums, and cultural centers, and personal care services such as massage parlors. All other sectors and relevant value chains will be allowed under the GCQ. The majority of these sectors and relevant value chains will either be partially allowed or not allowed to resume operations under the ECQ and MECQ. Good news to sports fans who want to stay active while under quarantine. Non-contact sports such as tennis, golf, and biking have been allowed in areas under general community quarantine. Defense Secretary Delfino Renzana, head of the National Task Force on the government's COVID-19 response, said only sports where physical distancing can be observed will be permitted under GCQ. He said collision or contact sports such as boxing, wrestling, and basketball will stay prohibited under GCQ. Under the guidelines released by Malacanang, the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases has also banned exercise in ECQ areas. However, limited outdoor exercise such as walking, jogging, and biking with safety protocols will be allowed under a modified ECQ. Gyms, fitness studios, and sport facilities will also remain closed in all ECQ, MECQ, and GCQ areas. Here's a new reason for you to stop smoking. The World Health Organization, or WHO, warns that smokers are more vulnerable to COVID-19 than non-smokers. A review of studies by public health experts found that smokers are at a higher risk of contracting fatal diseases. In a statement, the WHO said smoking impairs lung function, making it harder for the body to fight off the coronavirus, which primarily attacks the lungs. WHO also warned researchers, scientists, and the media about amplifying claims that tobacco or nicotine could reduce the risk of COVID-19. The statement came after several studies showing that the number of non-smokers was higher among COVID-19 patients compared to smokers. According to the WHO, tobacco kills more than 8 million people globally every year. After originating in China last December, COVID-19 has spread to at least 187 countries and regions. The pandemic has killed nearly 292,000 people worldwide. Take another look at today's biggest stories. The Interagency Task Force places areas with low risk of COVID-19 infection under a modified general community quarantine. NCRPO Chief Debold Sinas will face criminal charges for violating protocols under the Enhanced Community Quarantine during his birthday party. The Department of Trade and Industry says up to 78% of employees may return to work under the modified enhanced community quarantine. And the government adds informal settlers and persons with disabilities as priorities in the Balik Probinsya program. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, check our webpage or head onto the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government, how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags on all our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's really those of the biggest stories that you need to know from PNA Newsroom. I am Rom Dulfo. Good day and keep safe.